Remember innocent until proven guilty? Well, you're in for a treat with this one. I just found a clip from The View that is as ironic as it is intriguing, and you know why? Well, just a couple days before Donald Trump's election in 2016, The View and Joy Behar thought it'd be a good idea to invite his campaign manager, Kellyanne Conway, on and try to put her in a corner with Trump's rhetoric and his supposed ties to Russia, especially at the time. But with hindsight of the last 8 years, I think the show's producers probably wish they could erase this segment from the internet for how embarrassingly incorrect the ladies turned out to be. Just take a look at this for yourself before I tell you more about it.
You're a guy, Donald Trump. He's very cavalier about using nuclear weapons, and and even Europe is off the table. I mean, what? Aren't you petrified? You have 4 children. Is it reckless?
North Korea.
Is his rhetoric reckless?
No, his rhetoric is not reckless.
So when he says, "Well, maybe we could use,"
you're cherry picking comments.
What's the point of having them if you don't use them? He said. What kind of talk is that?
And he's talked about what that means. He doesn't mean that he's going to go and use them. And first of all, this nation has many people in charge of us.
I like you.
Well, thank you. I like you too.
I think that right here you're being delusional.
No, I'm not. I'm not being delusional.
I really do. I like you a lot. She's a nice Italian girl. This is a nice Italian girl.
But here we are in retrospect, living through a world ravaged by war since 2022. Even the UN has reported that we've not got the most concurrent conflicts right now than ever since World War II, with over 2 billion people living in countries under conflicts that can flare up at any moment. And that should tell you something. Donald Trump's rhetoric was flipping and all over the place, but it was that unpredictability that meant rival nations and terror groups did not want to take any chances with someone like him. In fact, even if you look at his record on nuclear weapons, yes, Trump's rhetoric was not very sophisticated, but it was a radical departure from his actual policy in office, which is what really matters. Here's something that he said in an interview with New York Times that exact same year that no one at The View, including Joy Behar, will tell you, calling them the absolute last step. Trump remarked on nuclear weapons saying, and I quote, "Power of weaponry today is beyond anything ever thought of. It's a very scary nuclear world. Biggest problem to me in the world is nuclear weapons and proliferation." When you pair that recognition of nuclear power with the understanding that the answer to nuclear blackmail from rival nations is equally fiery rhetoric, you get at least some semblance of a power balance in the world. And by the way, subscribe for more discussions like this if you enjoy it. I think that you look at even the current Russian conflict between Russia and Ukraine, you see the exact same thing. Vladimir Putin, emboldened by the weakness of America's leadership, has mentioned that nuclear weapons more than enough times to be a throwaway line. In fact, just this week, he said he holds a nuclear pistol to Ukraine, but didn't believe he wouldn't need to use one to completely annex Ukraine. On top of that, he's just called the rest of Europe defenseless, and that tells you about the massive power vacuum that Russia sees in the region. All of this has happened under the Biden administration, and there's not even so much as an attempt to create a balance of rhetorical power apart from sending hundreds of billions of dollars of tax money to Ukraine. Of course, even with a broader and more realistic hindsight of geopolitics, you can hardly expect someone like Joy Behar to give a better political take apart from calling Kellyanne Conway delusional, as she did. But after Kellyanne was met with a patronizing laughter from the show's audience, someone on the panel finally had something smart to say. Just listen to this.
I tell you what scares me, though. What scares me is the fact that Hillary Clinton always puts Hillary first. It does. It scares me. Guys, you want her to be the president of the United States, and you should look at her entire record. You should see what she's done in office as commander-in-chief. She owns the Russia reset. She owns Syria. She owns Libya. She owns the Middle East. She has not proven herself to be fit or qualified to be commander-in-chief.
The opposite side of this argument is also that I think some of his appeal is the talk toughness that he has. That,
well, we'd like to talk leader, yes.
I'm less afraid of rhetoric. I'm more afraid of terrorism. So I think that there is an appeal to someone who is
on the rise.
Yes.
That's right. You can't be so subsumed by trying to pick apart every word and phrase that you end up missing the forest for the trees. And that's the problem with much of this panel, which is incredible that you can trace it back 8 years, and probably much further back. Anyone that understands how international geopolitics works also knows the power of rhetoric and words. It's kind of like the stock market, because even if there's no fundamental economic change in the system, a rumor, speculation, or a statement by someone powerful can send ripples across the stock market. That's how powerful words are on the international stage, especially if they're interpreted as being concrete rather than simply bluff. Contrary to what a lot of people think, Putin and Kim Jong-un don't want nuclear conflict either. They want to continue their reign, expand their control, and solidify their place in it, and a bit of nuclear threat and blackmail only becomes a tool in their arsenal to do so. The answer has to be made in kind, coupled with an understanding that everything must be done to make sure no conflict escalates to the nuclear level. But for The View, that was just one part where they fell off the mark, because watch the conversation steer towards Donald Trump's alleged Russian business ties at the time, which is an accusation that turned on its head in just a few short years with Joe and Hunter Biden's alleged foreign business dealings.
I want to ask you about Russia. We talked about Iran, we talked about the nuclear deal, but Russia's involvement is also a big concern. Can you unequivocally say that Donald Trump has never done business with Russia, has never taken money from them, and never will?
That's what he's told me. And by the way, the New York Times buried on A21. On A21, they buried the story that the FBI investigation into Russia produced nothing.
The audience is laughing because we haven't seen his tax returns. Then we would know something.
There's a one. Yes, you know plenty. Here's what you know about Donald Trump. That Donald Trump fixes things, builds things, solves problems.
It's
Hillary
his
Clinton
name
went
on
from dead
everything.
broke to $250 million. No, it's not. It's not his
Somebody
name.
told me Trump Tower is made with Chinese steel,
including women.
The whole format of the show seems unfair at times, with 4 against 1 while not even letting Kellyanne finish a sentence. The truth is that while Donald Trump today stands as the first president in U.S. history criminally convicted, it has started shedding a light on many of the unresolved and undiscussed allegations that still hover above the current president and his son's foreign business dealings. And that includes not just China, but also Ukraine, where he was allegedly on the board of Ukrainian energy companies, creating a direct conflict of interest while his father was vice president. The truth is, America in this election, as well as the last, has had 2 suboptimal choices, and no one that doesn't recognize that fact can move forward in having the right mindset toward what politics is and their behavior in it. That's why half-baked and naive complaints from people like Joy Behar about Donald Trump's rhetoric on the international stage doesn't serve to enlighten anyone and only look ill-conceived in retrospect. We saw something predictably similar with Whoopi Goldberg here next.
Listen, this guy has lost more money than most of us will ever make in our lifetime.
Self-made billionaire.
He has lost more money. If you want to talk about nitpicking, I just want to know what his actual plan is. I love that you come and you make a very good argument for him, something he seems incapable of doing. The polls go like this, and they always have. But we're not going to know anything. Nobody's celebrating anything until the day after. And if he becomes the president, then he will be the president. But if she becomes the president, you don't have to deal with the same thing.
I will.
Okay?
Yeah, I certainly will.
And he will.
Very good. He says he will be the president.
No, I'm just saying.
Those who don't support him.
Yeah, I heard him say I don't believe it, but
everybody
that's
was
okay.
celebrating ABC polls 50 to 38.
We all know how that turned out. It's interesting because no one at The View will even bother to look back at how wrong they turned out to be about their fear-mongering of a Trump presidency, both locally and internationally. And with the incredible global changes we've seen in the last 5 years with the pandemic and multiple wars, the world could sure use some sense of stability and political weight that can pin down all this mess that's up in the air of uncertainty at the moment.